My name is Rachel Carter, and until a few months ago, I genuinely believed I understood what betrayal felt like. I'd been disappointed, overlooked, dismissed, sure, but nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the moment I opened an email from my board of directors and saw a set of attached documents claiming that my cousin, Lucas Parker, owned 65% of Brightspire Solar, the company I had built from scratch over the past 10 years. I stared at the signature on the revised ownership agreement, my signature, and felt my stomach drop so hard it was like hitting concrete. I knew instantly that I had never signed anything even remotely close to that. Yet there it was, my name, my forged handwriting, stamped by a notary I'd never heard of. It didn't even look like a good forgery. It looked like the kind of sloppy, rushed imitation done by someone who thought they'd never get caught. The board wanted answers. Investors wanted answers. And all I had in that moment was a shaky breath and a sickening understanding that someone I trusted had slipped a knife between my ribs. What made it worse was who it pointed to. Lucas, the boy who used to live in our guest room because his parents fell on hard times. The golden child my parents always treated like a second son. And sometimes, if I'm honest, like the son they wished they'd had. Before I dive deeper into how everything unraveled, how the people who should have protected me tried to erase me from my own company, take a moment and tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever had family twist your kindness or loyalty into something they could use against you, hit subscribe, because you're going to understand this story better than you think. Now let me bring you back to the moment this nightmare truly began. It was early April, a cloudy, windy afternoon in Boulder, Colorado. I was at the Brightspire campus, a building I'd fought for, negotiated for, prayed over, finishing prep for a pitch to West Ridge Utilities. My assistant Hannah rushed into my office with her tablet in hand. She'd received an anonymous tip through our internal compliance form claiming certain financial documents were being edited without authorization. At first, I brushed it off. These reports pop up every few months, usually misunderstandings or minor system glitches. But when Hannah showed me the login logs, my blood went ice cold. Multiple downloads, late-night activity, sensitive ownership files accessed from an IP address linked to my parents' home. That alone didn't make sense. My parents had no access. They had no reason to be anywhere near Brightspire's private folders. But someone else did. Lucas. He had been helping lightly advise on business development. My parents' idea, not mine. I agreed to it out of guilt, nostalgia, or maybe just exhaustion. At the time, I told myself I was being generous. Looking back now, I was being naive. Still, I didn't want to assume the worst. So I followed the trail quietly, tugging at threads that only tightened the knot in my chest. The more metadata I saw, the more the timestamps lined up, the more familiar his digital fingerprints became, the more dread crawled up my spine. The final blow came 3 days later when that email arrived from the board, the so-called updated ownership structure, the document that claimed I was no longer the majority owner of my own company. Brightspire Solar wasn't just a business, it was my identity, my life's work, my everything, and someone I once called family was trying to take it away. Looking back now, the signs were always there. Little cracks in the foundation of my family that I kept covering with explanations, excuses, and hope. But when your childhood is built on the idea that you're supposed to be the strong one, you learn to carry loneliness like it's just part of the job description. I grew up in a quiet neighborhood on the north side of Boulder, the kind of place where families waved from driveways and kids biked until the streetlights flickered on. My parents, Mark and Denise Carter, were the kind of people who loved order, predictability, and having a child who made them look good. Unfortunately, that role was never meant for me. It was meant for Lucas. He was my older cousin by 2 years. When his family struggled, first with his dad's layoffs, then with the divorce, my parents stepped in. Just until things stabilized, they told me. But temporary became a year, then 2, then practically forever. Lucas walked into our house with nothing but a duffel bag, and from that moment, it felt like I became the background character in my own home. I still remember the way my mom's voice softened whenever she talked to him, like he was made of something fragile and precious. If Lucas scraped his knee, she dropped everything to fuss over him. If I got an A on a physics exam, she smiled politely and then asked why it wasn't an A+. Dad wasn't much different. When Lucas made the basketball team, he bought him new shoes. When I won a statewide robotics competition, he asked why I didn't try out for track to be more well-rounded. It wasn't like they hated me. They just saved their pride for him. And I let it go, year after year, because I kept telling myself, he needs it more. I'm strong. I can handle it. But being strong all the time does something to you. It teaches you to swallow hurt until it becomes part of your bloodstream. It teaches you to be quiet about the things that matter. I remember one winter when Lucas's grades were slipping hard. My mom sat me down at the dining table and said, "Rachel, sweetheart, try helping Lucas with his homework. He's just not naturally gifted like you. Be patient with him." Naturally gifted? I was staying up until midnight every night doing homework, practicing coding, and teaching myself engineering concepts from old textbooks. But none of that mattered. Being the strong one meant carrying not just myself, but him too. By the time I left for college at Colorado State University, I felt relief more than pride. Finally, I thought, I can be someone without Lucas's shadow wrapped around me. But even then, it followed me. While I worked part-time jobs, applied for grants, and spent nights in engineering labs, Lucas bounced between community college and odd jobs. My parents sent him money regularly, the same parents who told me they couldn't afford to help me with textbooks. Whenever I came home for holidays, it was always the same story. Lucas is trying. He just needs a break. Lucas is finding himself. Lucas just hasn't discovered his passion yet. Meanwhile, I was building mine inch by inch, with no safety net. I don't think my parents ever realized that every time they praised Lucas while ignoring my achievements, it carved another quiet scar into the person I was becoming. I told myself it didn't matter, that one day my work would speak for itself. But in the end, all that silence, all those swallowed hurts, became the perfect soil for the betrayal that would nearly destroy everything I'd built.
When I think about the years I spent building Brightspire Solar, I picture sleepless nights in a freezing garage, soldering wires with numb fingers while the rest of Boulder slept. I picture months where my diet was instant noodles and cheap coffee because every dollar had to go into prototypes. I picture losing friendships, skipping birthdays, missing weddings, all because I believed in something bigger than myself. So when Lucas stepped toward my world, smiling that familiar, charming, effortless smile of his, I didn't see the danger. I only saw the boy who used to sleep across the hall, the one my parents adored, the one who always seemed to land on his feet, usually because someone else cushioned his fall. It started subtly. A comment here, a suggestion there. "Hey, Rachel, maybe I can help with investor outreach." "Hey, I've got a friend who knows about branding. I can ask around." "Hey, maybe you're taking on too much yourself." At first, I was grateful. Exhaustion does that to you. It makes you vulnerable to anybody who offers even a sliver of relief. And my parents, they pushed hard. Let Lucas contribute. He's family. He could be just what your company needs. Against my better judgment, I brought him in on a temporary basis. No major responsibilities, no access to sensitive documents, just light consulting. He didn't even have a full workstation at first, just a shared desk by the glass wall overlooking the mountains. But Lucas had this way of slipping into spaces he didn't belong, making himself look essential before anyone even realized he was there. Within weeks, he was sitting in meetings I hadn't invited him to. He lingered after presentations, chatting with engineers, laughing with analysts, making everyone feel like he was part of the team. And then came the first red flag. During a pitch prep meeting, he referred to Brightspire as our company. Not Rachel's company, not his cousin's company, our company. I brushed it off at first, even joked about it afterward, but the jokes didn't land. Something about the way he said it stuck in my mind like a thorn. Then came another, and another. He rearranged pitch slides without my approval. He started fielding calls from vendors. He scheduled lunches with potential partners using my calendar. He was slipping into the role of leadership without ever earning it. And the board? They liked him. Of course they did. Lucas had always had that easy charisma, the kind corporate people confuse with competence. But the moment that shifted everything came during a follow-up meeting with a major Denver-based venture group. One of their analysts pulled me aside and said, "Your cousin has a strong grasp of the financials. Impressive for a co-founder." Co-founder. The word exploded in my head like a grenade. I hadn't called him that. I hadn't implied it. I hadn't even considered it. Yet somehow, Lucas had introduced himself as the co-founder of Brightspire Solar. I confronted him that night in the parking lot, the mountains casting long shadows behind us. "Why did you call yourself co-founder?" I demanded. He laughed. Actually laughed. "Relax, Rachel. It makes us look stronger as a united front." "No," I said. "It makes you look like you're stealing credit." His smile thinned. "You're taking things way too personally." That's when I knew he wasn't helping. He was positioning himself, and I was handing him the latter. A few days later, a contractor from IT emailed me quietly about unusual activity. Large downloads, late-night logins, access attempts on restricted financial spreadsheets, all tied to an account with temporary consultant permissions. Lucas's account. I confronted him again, but this time he didn't bother pretending. He leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head, and said, "If you're worried about ownership, maybe you should have brought family in sooner." It felt like every insecurity from childhood condensed into a single sentence. Every time I had been overlooked, every time Lucas had been excused, every time my parents said, "Rachel can handle it," it was happening again, on a scale that could destroy everything. And the worst part? I still hadn't seen the full extent of the betrayal. Not yet. Because while I was scrambling to understand his sudden hunger for power, Lucas and my parents were already crafting a plan to take Brightspire Solar away from me entirely, behind my back, using my name, using forged documents, using the same family loyalty they'd preached my whole life. This wasn't just ambition. It was a carefully orchestrated takeover. And all of it was happening because I trusted the wrong people.
The moment everything truly began to fall apart wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't the kind of dramatic chaos people imagine when a company is ripped out from under its founder. No, Brightspire Solar didn't crumble with a bang. It cracked slowly, quietly, like ice splitting beneath your feet. You don't realize you're sinking until the water swallows your ankles. It started with a rejection email. I was in the middle of preparing financial projections when my inbox pinged with a response from the regional expansion loan officer we'd been working with for months. We had passed every requirement. The loan was practically guaranteed. But the message on my screen said, "Due to inconsistencies in the submitted ownership documentation, we are unable to proceed." Ownership documentation. I froze. I hadn't submitted anything recently. Neither had my CFO or legal team. I immediately called the loan officer. His tone was stiff, formal, almost rehearsed. Rachel, the paperwork we received lists you as a minority stakeholder. There are questions about the company's governance we can't overlook. My mouth went dry. Can you tell me who submitted those documents? I'm afraid I can't disclose that. But I didn't need him to say it. I knew. I forwarded the rejection email to our CFO, Melody Sharp, who called me within minutes. Panic vibrated in her voice. Rachel, this isn't a mistake. Someone submitted an entirely new cap table and revised operating agreement, and they used your signature. My vision tunneled. I should have cried. I should have yelled. I should have thrown something. But instead, I felt nothing. Just numbness. A hollow quiet that terrified me more than anger ever could. Melody requested an emergency audit. Within 24 hours, she found 2 different versions of our foundational documents in circulation, one genuine, one manufactured. Investors started reaching out one by one, confused, suspicious, wanting explanations I couldn't give because I didn't even understand what was happening myself. And then, the media got wind of it. Local Denver outlets picked up whispers of a solar startup ownership dispute, and within a day, the headlines grew sharper, uglier. Brightspire Solar co-founder conflict sparks legal concerns. Rumors of forgery shake Colorado tech darling. It was like watching a house I built with my own bloody hands catch fire. The next blow came from an unexpected angle: my parents' house. I drove there after Melody's audit, determined to find the original documents from when I'd registered Brightspire. My dad kept old files in a locked cabinet in the basement. Receipts, tax forms, childhood report cards. I found the folder labeled Rachel Business Docs. Inside was the original operating agreement. Clean, untouched, exactly as it had been when I founded the company. But behind it, a second envelope. Newer paper. Fresher ink. A notary stamp dated 2 years earlier. My forged signature signing over 65% ownership to Lucas. I felt the room spin. The air went thick and cold. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the pages. Then the basement door opened. My mother's voice drifted down the steps. Rachel, what are you doing here? I walked upstairs slowly, the counterfeit documents clutched in my hand. I laid them on the kitchen table without a word. Her face drained of color. Mom, why? She started crying immediately. Not a guilty cry, a defensive one. Lucas needed security. He's been struggling for years. You're strong, Rachel. You don't need as much as he does. I stared at her, unable to process the words. So you stole from me? We didn't steal, she snapped through tears. We fixed what should have been fair from the beginning. Before I could respond, the front door opened. My father walked in, took one look at the papers, and sighed. Exasperated, not ashamed. This again, he muttered. You always make everything difficult. I felt something inside me shatter. Not loud, not sudden, just quietly, like a fracture forming along a fault line that had always been there. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how easily they justified it, how sincerely they believed they were right, how completely they dismissed the years I spent breaking myself to build a future. And if that night wasn't enough, the universe had another punch waiting. Because the very next morning, someone leaked the recording of our confrontation to an online forum. Investors saw it. Employees saw it. The entire Boulder tech community saw it. Brightspire's stock plummeted. Contracts froze. Suppliers backed out. Everything I had built was slipping away, and the people I loved most had struck the match that burned it down. The morning after the leak, I sat alone in my office, surrounded by half-packed boxes, legal folders spread across the floor, and the kind of silence that feels heavy enough to crush bone. For the first time since founding Brightspire, I wasn't sure if I had a company anymore. I wasn't even sure if I had a future. But grief eventually gives way to something sharper, something steadier. There's a moment, after you've lost everything you thought mattered, when the fear drains out, and what's left is clarity. That moment came for me around 3 a.m., staring at the blinking cursor in an email draft I couldn't bring myself to send. I closed my laptop, leaned back in my chair, and whispered to myself, "No more crying, Rachel. Fight." 2 days later, I walked into a small law office in downtown Denver and met Erin Maloney, the woman people in Colorado's business circles half-jokingly referred to as the corporate Grim Reaper. She was sharp, composed, mid-40s, with glasses that stayed perfectly still even when she moved. Erin listened to my entire story without interrupting once. When I finally slid the forged documents across her desk, she didn't gasp, didn't flinch. She just leaned forward and said, "Rachel, this isn't just messy family drama. This is felony-level fraud, and you're going to win." Those 5 words felt like oxygen. Next came Keith Raymond, a forensic analyst who could dissect metadata like a surgeon. He wore rumpled sweaters, spoke softly, and carried around 3 laptops like they were extensions of his arms. But behind his gentle voice was a razor-sharp expertise that made even seasoned attorneys nervous. Keith examined every suspicious document, tapping through layers of digital fingerprints. Within hours, he uncovered a pattern. The forged agreement had been created on Lucas's laptop, not mine. My signature had been lifted from an old scanned contract. The file had been uploaded to Brightspire servers from an IP located in my parents' living room. Multiple late-night logins aligned exactly with Lucas's temporary consultant credentials. Every discovery was a spark in the darkness. For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel: hope. Meanwhile, Erin worked behind the scenes, compiling everything into a structured legal assault: criminal charges for forgery, civil claims for financial damages, a corporate injunction preventing any further use of the fake documents. She drafted motions with surgical precision, each paragraph a blade. But the turning point came one evening when Melody, my CFO, stopped by my office. She found me surrounded by Keith's evidence diagrams. "You're doing the right thing, Rachel. You're not destroying your family. They destroyed your trust, and now you're just protecting what you built." Her words landed deeper than she knew. For years, I'd equated endurance with love. I thought that carrying the weight was the same as being loyal. But loyalty without boundaries becomes self-destruction, and I was done destroying myself. That night, I stood in the middle of Brightspire's lobby, hourglass panels glowing gold under the late evening lights, solar prototypes humming quietly behind display cases, and made a promise. I built this. I bled for this, and I will take it back. Not out of vengeance, not out of anger, but out of a renewed, crystal-clear understanding of my own worth. I wiped away the last tears I would shed for this betrayal, straightened my blazer, and stepped into Erin's office the next morning, ready to do what I should have done months earlier: fight for myself. With calm, with evidence, with conviction. The storm wasn't over, but for the first time, I wasn't drowning. I was steering.
The day of the board meeting felt like the world had finally stopped spinning long enough for me to catch my breath and prepare to break the cycle once and for all. Erin stood beside me as we entered the glass-walled conference room at Brightspire headquarters. The atmosphere was colder than usual. Executives whispered in tight clusters, investors paced by the windows, and the board chairs sat rigidly at the end of the table as if bracing for impact. Lucas was already there.
He wore a tailored suit, hair slicked back, confidence radiating from him like he already owned the place. And why wouldn't he? In his mind, he had already won. He nodded at me with a smugness so polished it almost sparkled. "Glad you can make it, Rachel," he said, pulling out a chair as though he were the host of this spectacle. I didn't sit. Neither did Aaron. The board filed in and the chair cleared his throat. "We're here today to address conflicting ownership claims and determine who has controlling authority over Brightspire Solar." Lucas stood first, of course he did, and began presenting his fabricated narrative. He clicked through slides showing growth projections, future plans, even photos of him shaking hands with partners he'd barely met. "As the majority stakeholder," he said confidently, "I believe Brightspire needs stronger leadership that aligns with both family legacy and long-term vision." Family legacy. The words nearly made me laugh. When he finished, a few board members nodded, visibly swayed. He had charm, I'd give him that. He had always known how to dress lies in pretty wrapping paper. Then it was my turn. I walked to the front of the room with Aaron and Keith flanking me. My hands were steady, not because I wasn't nervous, but because the truth has a way of holding you up when everything else tries to knock you down. "Before any discussion continues," Aaron said, setting a stick binder on the table, "we need to address the authenticity of the documents Mr. Parker submitted." Keith connected his laptop to the main screen. He navigated through metadata logs, timestamps, IP addresses, all the digital fingerprints Lucas never expected anyone to find. The room slowly shifted. Confusion? Shock? Realization? Gasps rippled across the table as Keith displayed the forgery overlays. My genuine signature on one side, Lucas's digital cut-and-paste job on the other. "This document," Aaron continued, tapping the forged agreement, "was generated on Mr. Parker's laptop, uploaded from an IP address belonging to Mark and Denise Carter, notarized by an unregistered notary who is currently under investigation." Lucas's smirk faltered. Just slightly, but enough. One board member whispered, "Oh my God." Another leaned forward, whispering to the chair, "This is criminal." And then, right on cue, the conference room doors swung open. Two uniformed Denver police officers stepped inside. "Lucas Parker," one of them said firmly. Lucas blinked. "Excuse me?" "You're under arrest for felony forgery, wire fraud, and attempted corporate theft." The entire room froze. My parents, who had shown up to support Lucas, stood behind him, pale and panicked. When the officers handcuffed Lucas, my mother gasped, reaching for him, but another officer blocked her. "Ma'am, please step back." Lucas twisted toward me, eyes wide with disbelief. "You did this? Rachel, we're family." I met his gaze, steady and unbroken. "No," I said quietly. "Family doesn't do what you did." The officers escorted him out. Cameras from the hallway flashed as the news crews captured the moment. The board chair turned to me. "Ms. Carter, the board votes unanimously to restore full ownership rights to you, effective immediately." Melody exhaled loudly, relief washing over her. Engineers in the hallway clapped as the news spread. Brightspire stock rose 11% by market close. Justice. Real, legal, solid justice. Not revenge, not pettiness, just truth finally standing on its own 2 feet. And for the first time in months, I felt lighter.
In the weeks that followed, Brightspire slowly settled back into the rhythm it once had. Steady, focused, honest. Contracts restarted, partners returned. Employees smiled again when they walked through the doors. And yet, even as the company healed, something inside me remained tender, like a bruise that still aches when pressed. I stopped answering my parents' calls, not out of anger, but out of clarity. Sometimes distance isn't punishment, it's protection. I finally understood that I couldn't keep setting myself on fire to keep people warm, especially people who never learned to stand without leaning on me. I learned something else too. Blood may connect you, but trust is what makes someone family. And trust isn't given, it's earned. My story didn't end with a villain falling or a company saved. It ended with me finally choosing myself after a lifetime of choosing everyone else. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who should have protected you, if you've ever had to rebuild from a hurt you didn't deserve, tell me your story in the comments. What would you have done in my place? I'm listening.